It was a perfect morning in the pine forest of Oregon. Sunlight danced across the Turner family's little cabin as laughter echoed through the rooms. Jack's children were helping their mother pack for the long-awaited trip. Everything was peaceful, until a sudden bark shattered the calm. Rex, the family's loyal German shepherd, charged across the room and bit into their suitcase, growling as if fighting something invisible. Jack froze. Rex had never done this before. His heart tightened. Why was the dog acting like this? What was he trying to warn them about? Before we begin this story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe. Because what happens next will make you question what a dog can truly see. The morning light seeped through the mist that clung to the evergreens of Oregon's backcountry. In the heart of Maple Hollow, a small town known for its scent of rain and pine resin, stood a wooden cabin whose roof sagged slightly under the weight of the years. Inside, Jack Turner sat at the kitchen table, his broad hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee. His shoulders carried the quiet heaviness of someone who had seen too much sand, too much blood, and too many sunrises in places that never felt like home. Jack was 42, tall, his back still straight like the soldiers he once commanded. His hair had gone gray at the edges, cut short in the same precise way the army had drilled into him. A faint scar crossed his right cheek, something left from Afghanistan, though he never told anyone how he got it. His eyes, the color of storm water, seemed always to be watching for something unseen. Across from him, Alexi Turner, his wife, moved with quiet grace. A former nurse, Alexi was a woman of mixed Slavic descent, tall and slender with pale skin that bruised easily and hair the color of autumn wheat. She spoke softly, but there was a firmness beneath her gentleness, the kind that came from patching broken bodies in war clinics. Alexi was the reason Jack could sleep through most nights. Her calmness had replaced the noise of war with the steady rhythm of ordinary life. From the second floor, the sound of footsteps thundered. Two small storms named Emma and Luke. Emma, the elder at 12, already had her mother's kindness and her father's stubborn jawline. Luke, 8, was all mischief and laughter, his freckles scattered like the first dusting of snow across his nose. They were the pulse that kept the house alive. Jack's eyes lifted to the wall where a photograph hung. Two men in desert fatigues, sunburned and smiling, arms draped over each other. One was him. The other, Sergeant Miller, his best friend, the man who had once joked that no bullet could find him. But it had. And that memory still sat in Jack's chest like an unspent round. It was at Miller's memorial 2 years ago that Jack first saw Rex. The dog had been sitting beside an officer's boots, silent, his fur matted and dull. A German shepherd, 3 years old, with a proud chest and intelligent amber eyes that carried both vigilance and grief. Rex had served beside Miller, trained to detect explosives. When Miller fell, Rex stayed beside the body for 3 days in the desert heat before rescue found them. Since then, no handler had been able to command him. He obeyed no one. He simply waited. Jack couldn't stand it. He'd gone to the military's K-9 rescue facility out of something between guilt and duty. When he saw Rex again in the steel cage, thin, his once sleek coat dulled to the color of ash, he knew the decision was already made. "Come on, soldier," Jack murmured through the bars. "You don't deserve to be left behind either." Rex lifted his head, ears twitching, the faintest movement of the tail. A week later, the papers were signed. Jack brought him home. At first, Rex was distant, sleeping near the door, always alert, as if expecting orders that never came. But with time, he began to change. Alexi's gentle voice soothed him. Emma fed him biscuits by hand. Luke threw sticks he never failed to retrieve. Soon, Rex began to follow Jack everywhere. The porch, the yard, the truck. His loyalty was quiet but absolute, a shadow that never left Jack's side. Under Alexei's care, the dog regained his strength. His coat shimmered again, dark sable with streaks of gold near the chest. His left ear still bore a small scar, a white line that looked like lightning frozen in fur. When he ran through the tall grass, he looked like a piece of the wilderness itself, untamed yet noble. Months passed. The scars of war in both man and animal began to fade into the rhythm of Maple Hollow. Morning coffee, the smell of pine smoke, the laughter of children, the distant cry of eagles. Jack found peace in small things, fixing the porch railing, teaching Luke how to build a campfire, or simply sitting with Rex by the lake at dusk. But inside, a sliver of unease always lingered, like a radio signal only soldiers could still hear. When summer arrived, Alexei suggested they take a family trip. "You need a break from this house, Jack," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "The children have never seen Blue Pine Lake. 3 days, that's all." Blue Pine Lake. The name alone stirred something in Jack, a longing for calm waters, for silence that didn't remind him of loss. He agreed. The week leading up to the trip was filled with excitement. Emma packed her sketchbooks. Luke counted his toy soldiers. Alexei folded clothes into neat piles that smelled of lavender detergent. Jack checked the truck twice, made lists, rechecked them. Rex watched it all in silence from the porch, his tail flicking restlessly. 2 nights before they were to leave, Rex began pacing. He would stand at the edge of the yard, ears high, nose tilted to the wind, growling low at something far beyond the dark. Jack thought it was deer or maybe coyotes, common this time of year. He called Rex back inside, and the dog obeyed, though reluctantly. By dawn, the sky had turned a pale gold. The forest whispered in the wind like an old secret. The truck was packed, the kids were laughing, and Alexei was checking the house one last time. Jack loaded the final suitcase into the back seat and whistled for Rex. But Rex didn't come. He stood by the doorway, teeth bared, fur bristling along his spine. A deep growl rose from his chest, the kind that came not from anger but from fear. "Rex!" Jack's voice dropped, half command, half concern. The dog barked, sharp, warning, frantic. He lunged forward, grabbed one of the suitcases by the handle, and tore it open. Clothes scattered like startled birds. Emma gasped. Luke laughed, thinking it was a game, until Rex turned and snapped at another bag, shredding the zipper apart. "Hey, stop it!" Jack shouted. He reached for Rex, but the dog dodged him, placing himself squarely between the family and the front door. His eyes were fixed, unwavering, filled with a desperate insistence that chilled Jack to the bone. "Jack," Alexei whispered, "what's wrong with him?" Jack's training told him to assert control, give a command, use tone, regain dominance. But something about the way Rex stood, head low, tail stiff, ears pinned, told him this wasn't disobedience. It was panic. Jack knelt, lowering his voice. "Easy, boy. What's out there?" Rex didn't move. His chest rose and fell fast. The air between them thickened, charged. The clock ticked 8:14 a.m. They were already late to leave. The children clung to Alexei's sides. She looked at Jack, her voice trembling. "Should we still go?" Jack hesitated. He wanted to believe it was nothing, that maybe Rex was just anxious, that the months of calm had made him forget what real danger felt like. But a small voice deep inside, the same one that once told him when to duck before a bullet flew, whispered otherwise. He looked into Rex's eyes. They weren't the eyes of a frightened animal. They were pleading, warning. "Jack?" Alexei pressed. He didn't answer. Rex took a step forward, nudged Jack's boot with his muzzle, then turned his head toward the door again, growling low, as if trying to stop them from crossing a line they couldn't return from. Outside, the wind had died. The forest stood perfectly still. Even the birds had gone silent. And for the first time since Afghanistan, Jack Turner felt the weight of something coming. Something unseen, but close. By evening, the tension that had filled the Turner household hung as thick as the Oregon mist outside. The trip to Blue Pine Lake was forgotten, the suitcases still half torn open on the floor. Rex lay near the door, his chest rising and falling in heavy rhythm, eyes still alert. Jack sat opposite him, elbows on his knees, his fingers pressed against his temples. He had faced artillery, ambushes, and nights where death felt close enough to taste, yet nothing unsettled him more than the look in his dog's eyes that morning. Alexei moved quietly about the kitchen, her apron still dusted with flour. The smell of cornbread filled the air, though no one seemed hungry. Her gentle hands, the same ones that once stitched soldiers' wounds, now trembled slightly as she poured coffee for Jack. She watched him in silence, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed on Rex. "He senses something," she whispered. "He always does." Jack didn't respond. Instead, his thoughts drifted backward to the night 2 months ago, when he'd woken to Rex's low, desperate growl. At first he'd thought the dog was dreaming, but then a faint hiss reached his ears, the sound of leaking gas. The stove valve had loosened from age. Had Rex not alerted them, the entire cabin could have gone up in flames. Then there was the afternoon storm. Alexei had been hanging laundry, the sky a clear blue, when Rex began pacing in circles, barking toward the west. She laughed at first, until the first crack of thunder split the air 10 minutes later, and rain fell like poured glass. And the third time, when Rex clawed furiously at the old barn door, Jack opened it to see sparks bursting from a frayed wire, seconds before the dry hay could ignite. Each time Rex had known before they did. Jack rubbed his palms together, his mind caught between logic and faith. If he hadn't stopped us... He didn't finish the thought. Alexei met his eyes and saw the same silent dread she'd seen in the triage tents overseas, the fear of realizing that fate had brushed past, just an inch away. Outside, the evening darkened. Rain tapped against the windows, gentle at first, then harder, faster. Luke and Emma sat cross-legged on the rug, trying to puzzle out their father's mood. Emma looked up, her hair falling across her face. "Dad, are we still going? Maybe tomorrow?" Jack opened his mouth, but hesitated. "We'll see," he said softly. "Maybe next week." Rex stirred. He lifted his head, ears twitching, gaze fixed on the window as if listening to something miles away. The rain grew heavier. Jack stood, walked to the door, and peered out. The woods beyond were a blur of dark shapes and moving shadows, the wind carrying whispers through the pines. That night, Jack dreamed of Afghanistan again. The roar of engines, the dust, the echo of Sergeant Miller's laughter moments before the blast. But in the dream, Miller was replaced by Rex, standing in the same spot, barking at something unseen behind him. Then, the sound of collapsing earth. Jack awoke at dawn, breath sharp, sweat cold against his neck. The house was quiet except for the faint creak of floorboards. Rex sat beside his bed, staring at him with an almost human solemnity. "You felt it too, didn't you?" Jack murmured, his voice hoarse. The next 3 days passed in restless quiet. Life resumed, but beneath it ran an undercurrent of unease. Jack went back to work at the local repair shop, run by Tom Reed, a sturdy man in his 50s with oil-stained hands and a thick mustache that seemed to frown even when he smiled. Tom was the kind of man who believed in what he could fix with a wrench. Nothing more, When Jack told him about Rex's strange behavior, Tom only chuckled. "Maybe your dog's got PTSD same as you, huh?" he joked, though his tone softened after seeing Jack's serious face. Jack forced a grin, but the words lingered. He wondered if it could be true. Maybe both he and Rex were haunted by ghosts of places they'd barely survived. At home, Alexei tried to fill the days with normalcy, gardening, baking, and laughter with the children, but she too caught herself glancing toward Rex more often. The dog was uneasy, pacing the porch, staring toward the horizon as if waiting for someone who never came. On the evening of the third day, the family gathered in the living room. The television flickered softly in the dim light. The weatherman's voice was calm, speaking of tremors in the northern regions. Minor seismic activity, nothing unusual. Alexei was folding laundry when the words Blue Pine Lake appeared on the screen. The anchor's voice shifted. Firm. Urgent. A 5.9 magnitude quake struck near Blue Pine Lake this morning, triggering severe landslides along the eastern slopes. Several lodges and cabins have been damaged, and rescue teams are on site. The room fell silent. Emma dropped the towel she was holding. Luke's toy soldier rolled from his hand and clicked across the floor. Jack stared at the TV, his throat tightening. The screen showed twisted timber and crushed rooftops, one of which bore the sign of their booked cabin, Maple Haven Lodge. Alexei's hand went to her mouth. Her voice was a whisper. That's where we... Jack nodded slowly. He could hear nothing but the faint hum of the static on the television. Rex lay beside the couch, head on his paws, his amber eyes reflecting the blue light of the screen. No one spoke for a long time. Later, when the news ended, Jack stepped outside. The rain had stopped, but the ground still glistened. The scent of wet earth rose thick and metallic. He sat on the porch steps, elbows on his knees, staring into the distance. Rex followed, settling beside him. For a while, neither moved. Then Jack whispered, "You knew." Rex tilted his head, ears twitching. "I don't know how," Jack continued, "but you knew." He reached out, resting a hand on the dog's head. "You saved us, boy." A light breeze stirred through the pines, carrying the faint cry of an owl. Jack glanced back through the window. Alexei was comforting the children, her hand resting on Emma's shoulder. The dim yellow light made her look fragile yet unbroken, like the moon behind a cloud. Inside, the clock ticked past midnight. Jack stood to go in, but Rex suddenly stiffened, ears pricking toward the tree line. A low rumble passed through the earth, soft, distant, gone in an instant. Jack froze, pulse quickening. "Aftershock," he muttered. He waited, but nothing followed. The forest returned to silence. Yet somewhere beneath that silence, he thought he heard it again, just barely, a vibration like a heart beating deep under the soil. Rex growled low in his throat. Jack looked down at him. "What is it this time?" Rex didn't answer, of course. He only stared into the woods, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. And though the night was still, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had spared them at Blue Pine had not yet finished speaking. A week had passed since the earthquake at Blue Pine, yet its shadow lingered in Maple Hollow like a chill that refused to leave. The Turner's cabin, once warm with laughter, now carried an odd silence between the walls. Outside, the trees swayed gently, but even the birds seemed reluctant to sing. Rex lay on the porch most days, his ears twitching at sounds only he could hear. At first, the townsfolk came to congratulate Jack. Neighbors brought pies and shook his hand, praising Rex as the miracle dog. Jack accepted their words with humble nods, his usual stoicism masking pride and disbelief. But admiration in small towns can sour as quickly as milk. It started with whispers at the diner. Clara Jennings, a heavyset woman in her 60s who ran the local bakery, mentioned over coffee that dogs like that don't just sense danger, they bring it. Her words carried weight in Maple Hollow. Clara, with her gray curls and sharp tongue, was the kind of woman everyone listened to even when they didn't want to. She wasn't cruel, just superstitious. Her husband had died in a logging accident years ago, and since then, she'd blamed omens for everything she couldn't explain. Soon, others began to talk. At the hardware store, at church, at the weekly farmer's market, people repeated stories, embellished versions of what had happened. Some said Rex howled all night like he was talking to ghosts. Others said he'd seen the quake before it happened because he carried death in his nose. Jack heard it first from Deputy Mark Collins, a tall, lean man in his late 30s with a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. He'd served briefly in the National Guard before joining the sheriff's office, and he still walked with the controlled stiffness of a soldier. Mark respected Jack, but was caught between duty and politics. "Jack," he said one afternoon, pulling his cruiser into the Turners' driveway. "Folks are scared. They filed a formal complaint. Say your dog's dangerous." Jack stood beside the porch steps, his hands tightening around a wrench. "Dangerous? He saved lives." "I know," Mark replied, his voice low. "But some of them say he attacked your luggage, destroyed property, scared their kids. You know how this town gets when it doesn't understand something." Jack looked over at Rex, who sat quietly by the porch railing, his amber eyes calm. "He's not the danger, Mark. He's the warning." Mark sighed. "I'm not here to take him. Just keep him close, for now." After the deputy left, Alexei stepped outside. The late afternoon sun lit her golden hair like a halo. "What did he want?" she asked. Jack told her, and she frowned. "People always fear what they can't control," she said softly. "It's human nature." Jack wanted to believe her, but doubt had already begun to creep in. That evening, as he walked Rex through town, he noticed how people stared. Some crossed the street. A group of children who once loved to pet Rex now watched from a distance, whispering. Only one of them, a small boy named Henry Clark, about 7, with a missing front tooth and a red wool cap, ran up and hugged Rex without hesitation. "Hi, buddy," he said. Henry's mother, Mrs. Clark, a young widow with tired eyes, called after him nervously. "Sorry, Mr. Turner," she murmured. "Henry just loves dogs. He doesn't mean—" Jack smiled faintly. "It's all right. Rex loves company." But as they walked home, the sting of those whispers stayed with him. 2 days later, the town council meeting was called at the old courthouse. Jack stood at the back, Alexei beside him, as a crowd gathered. Farmers, shopkeepers, retirees. Clara Jennings stood at the podium, her voice carrying through the wooden hall. "I'm not saying the animal's evil," she began, "but ever since that dog came here, strange things have happened. Earthquakes, tremors, dead crows on my porch. You can't tell me it's just coincidence." Murmurs filled the room. Jack's jaw clenched. When the council chair asked if anyone wished to respond, he stepped forward. The wooden floor creaked beneath his boots. "I served 20 years in combat," Jack said evenly, his voice filling the room. "I've seen real evil, men who kill for sport, storms that swallow cities. This dog?" He placed a hand on Rex's head. "This dog saved my family, saved this town. He doesn't bring danger, he warns us of it. You want to call that unnatural? Fine. But maybe the world could use a little more of that kind of unnatural." The room fell silent. Alexei's eyes glistened with quiet pride. Even Clara's expression softened, though she crossed her arms, unwilling to yield completely. By the next morning, the gossip had quieted but not disappeared. Jack focused on work again, keeping his head down. Rex, however, seemed unaffected, if anything, calmer. He followed Jack to the shop, sat patiently while engines roared and wrenches clattered, watching everything with that steady gaze of his. Then winter came early. Snow fell in thick, heavy curtains, covering the streets in silence. One morning, as Jack shoveled the path outside the cabin, he saw Rex standing by the road, tail wagging slightly. Across the street, an elderly woman, Mrs. Lillian Hart, frail and nearly blind, was struggling with her cane, trying to cross. Cars were sliding by on icy pavement. "Stay, Rex," Jack called, but the dog was already moving. He trotted toward her, nudged her hand gently, then guided her step by step across the road. Drivers slowed, watching in disbelief. By the time she reached the other side, the entire street had stopped to stare. Lillian smiled, her wrinkled face radiant beneath her wool hat. "Thank you, soldier," she whispered, patting Rex's head. Word of the moment spread fast. The next day, the local paper ran a photo: "Hero dog helps elderly woman cross icy road." Clara Jennings herself placed a free biscuit by the bakery door for the town's bravest citizen. A week later, another story followed. A burglar had broken into St. Mary's Church late at night. Father Thomas Quinn, a stooped, silver-haired priest in his 70s, was locking up when Rex, walking with Jack nearby, began to growl. He bolted through the half-open door, barking wildly. Moments later, the thief ran out, nearly tripping over his own feet. Father Quinn caught his breath, crossing himself. "Heaven sent that creature," he told the sheriff. By Christmas, the town's fear had turned into admiration. Children played with Rex again. Henry Clark brought him treats wrapped in ribbons. Alexi joked that Rex got more visitors than the mayor. One evening, as snow drifted down in soft flakes, Jack sat by the fire, stroking Rex's fur. "They finally see you for who you are," he murmured. Alexi leaned against his shoulder, smiling, but Rex's eyes were distant, fixed on the window. Beyond it, the forest loomed dark and still. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, soft, almost too faint to hear. Rex's ears perked, and he let out a low, uneasy growl. Jack followed his gaze. "What is it this time?" he asked quietly. The dog didn't move, only stared deeper into the blackness. Outside, the wind shifted, and a single pine branch cracked under unseen weight. The firelight flickered. Alexi shivered. "Jack, close the window." He rose, but before he reached it, Rex stood up, tail stiff, muscles tense. The growl deepened. Jack froze, hand on the latch. "Easy, boy," he whispered. Rex didn't blink. His gaze stayed fixed on the forest, on something none of them could see. And then, from somewhere far beyond the pines, a sound came, low, distant, almost like a heartbeat beneath the snow. By early September, the air in Maple Hollow had changed. The mornings no longer carried the sweet scent of pine resin. Instead, they were heavy with moisture, the sky wrapped in a pale, uneasy gray. The townsfolk went about their days with an eye on the horizon, murmuring about the weather reports, something about a tropical depression moving north from the Pacific. No one thought much of it, no one except Rex. The German shepherd had grown restless since that strange night when thunder murmured from the forest. He paced the yard, ears twitching, tail stiff. Sometimes he'd stop, stare towards the western hills, and emit a low growl that seemed to rise from deep in his chest. Jack tried to soothe him, but Rex refused to relax. He dug near the back fence, tore through the wet soil as though searching for something hidden beneath. Jack watched him one afternoon, wiping sweat from his brow. "What's gotten into you, boy?" he muttered. Rex ignored him, his paws striking mud with frantic rhythm. Dirt flew in clumps until the sharp scent of damp clay filled the air. Beneath the churned soil, water was seeping upward, slowly, steadily. Jack knelt, touched it, and felt the chill of spring run off. It hadn't rained in days. That night, as clouds rolled over the mountains, Jack called the town office. Mayor Douglas Haynes, a stout man in his late 50s with thinning hair and a mustache that seemed to carry more authority than his words, answered with his usual bluntness. "Turner, you're saying your dog found a puddle, and that's cause for alarm?" Jack pinched the bridge of his nose. "It's more than that. The ground's shifting behind my property. Wet spots, small cracks. It could be a landslide waiting to happen." Haynes chuckled softly. "We get rain every September. Don't let that soldier's paranoia kick in again." "It's not paranoia when the earth's breathing under your feet," Jack replied, voice tight. But the mayor was already signing off. "I'll send someone to take a look. Next week, maybe. Relax, Turner. You've got a hero dog, not a geologist." When Jack hung up, frustration burned in his chest. Alexei, standing by the sink, spoke quietly. "You did what you could." Her eyes, usually calm, were shadowed with worry. "But if Rex feels it's dangerous," Jack nodded, "then we prepare." Over the next 2 days, the weather worsened. The wind pressed against the cabin like a living thing, and the sky hung lower, bruised with dark clouds. Rex barely slept. He barked at every rumble, every flicker of light beyond the tree line. Luke and Emma grew uneasy, their laughter fading. On the third night, the rain came. It started as a drizzle, then turned into a roar that swallowed the valley. Water lashed the windows, thunder rolled through the hills, and the old timbers of the cabin creaked under the storm's weight. Rex barked without pause, claws scraping at the door. Jack tried to calm him, shouting over the wind. "What is it?" The dog bolted toward the back, pressing his nose against the sliding door that led to the yard. Jack grabbed a flashlight and followed. The beam caught the slope behind the house, and his stomach dropped. The soil, once firm, was weeping. Thin rivulets of water trickled down, carving narrow trenches. The ground was sagging. He rushed inside. "Alexei, get the kids up. We're leaving now." Alexei's face went pale. She didn't ask questions. Within minutes, they had the children wrapped in coats, flashlights in hand. Jack threw a few essentials into a duffel bag, his movements sharp, efficient. Rex was already by the truck, soaked to the bone, barking toward the town road. Jack lifted Emma into the back seat, shouting to be heard. "We're heading to the old fire station. Higher ground!" As the truck engine roared to life, the headlights cut through sheets of rain. The dirt road had turned to slick mud. Jack gripped the wheel, knuckles white, as the tires slid and skidded. Alexei held the children close, murmuring prayers in Russian under her breath. A remnant of her mother's faith. Halfway to town, Jack's phone buzzed. It was Deputy Mark Collins. "Jack, you seeing this weather? We've got flooding downtown. Mayor says to stay put if you're safe." Jack's voice was tight. "The ridge behind us is collapsing. Get word to Haynes. This isn't a flood, it's a landslide waiting to bury half the valley." There was silence. Then Mark's curse crackled through the line. "Copy that. I'm calling in the warning. Get your family out." When they reached the fire station, a few other families had already arrived, drenched, frightened. Ed Parker, the fire chief, a barrel-chested man with a trimmed beard and calm authority, met Jack at the door. "You're the one who called it, huh? Good timing. We just got the alert from Collins. The whole Western Hills sliding." Jack looked back through the storm. In the distance, the faint glow of their cabin flickered once before vanishing behind a curtain of rain. He felt a hollow weight settle in his gut. By dawn, the rain eased. The survivors stepped outside into a world remade by mud and silence. The western ridge had partially collapsed, sending a tide of soil, trees, and debris through the lower end of Maple Hollow. But the evacuation, called only minutes before the collapse, had saved everyone. Not a single life was lost. The town gathered at the square that afternoon, the air thick with disbelief. Mayor Haynes arrived late, his boots still caked with mud, face pale. When he saw Jack and Rex, he hesitated, then approached with a stiff nod. "You were right. I should have listened sooner." Jack looked down at Rex, whose fur was still damp, but whose tail wagged weakly. "You can thank him," Jack said quietly. The mayor cleared his throat. "Then I will. Maple Hollow owes this dog a debt." Over the following days, the story spread far beyond the valley. Reporters came, snapping photos of the soldier and savior dog. But Jack didn't care for headlines. He only cared that his family, and his town, were alive. On the evening after the storm, when the town lights finally flickered back on, Alexei sat by the fireplace, the glow painting her face in soft amber. "They finally see him," she said, looking at Rex curled near her feet. "Not as a curse, but as what he truly is." Jack smiled faintly. "Yeah, though I think he's already looking for the next thing to save us from." Outside, the hills stood dark against the fading sky. The wind carried the scent of wet pine and renewal. Rex lifted his head, ears twitching once more. For a moment his eyes caught the light. Calm, watchful, almost knowing. Jack followed his gaze to the distant ridge, where the rain clouds were parting to reveal a thin line of light. He exhaled slowly. The worst had passed. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that Rex was listening to something they couldn't hear. The forest rustled softly, and then the night grew still again. When the rains finally stopped, Maple Hollow looked like a painting washed clean by the hand of mercy. The mud had dried into soft ribbons along the roads. The river returned to its gentle whisper, and the air smelled of pine and renewal. Houses stood scarred, but not broken, their roofs patched, their windows open once again to the mountain breeze. In front of the Turner cabin, the porch had been rebuilt, the wood fresh and golden. And lying on that porch, as always, was Rex. Jack Turner leaned on the railing, a mug of steaming coffee in his hands. The morning sun caught the silver threads in his hair. The lines at the corners of his eyes deepened but softer now. He had lost many things in his life: friends, sleep, sometimes even faith, but never gratitude. When he looked at Rex, stretched lazily in the warmth, tail tapping against the floorboards, he felt the kind of peace only soldiers long after. Behind him, Alexei stepped outside carrying a small wooden sign. Her slender figure moved with quiet purpose. She still wore her simple wool cardigan, and her hair was tied loosely, the color of wheat against the morning light. "They finished it," she said, her voice gentle. She brushed the dust from the sign, revealing carved letters darkened by varnish. "Rex, the guardian of the storm sky." Jack took it, running his thumb across the grooves. The words felt heavier than wood. "He earned this," he murmured. Soon the townsfolk began to gather. Children with freckled noses and messy hair came first, Luke and Emma among them, carrying handfuls of wildflowers and little treats. Clara Jennings arrived with a basket of warm biscuits, her once skeptical eyes now soft with affection. The baker's apron was dusted with flour, and she laughed when Rex sniffed at her hand. "Oh, hush, you big hero," she said. "You've got more fans than my apple pie." Deputy Mark Collins stood beside the mayor, both men freshly shaven and formal, despite the country mud still clinging to their boots. Mark looked less stern than usual. He even smiled when Rex padded up to him. You saved my town, pal, he said quietly. That's more than I can ever say I've done. Mayor Douglas Haynes cleared his throat, his mustache twitching nervously. He wasn't used to admitting mistakes in public. Friends, he began, Maple Hollow owes its safety to a soldier, and to his companion. We once feared what we didn't understand. But when danger came, it was this dog, Rex, who saw what we could not. So, by the will of this community, we honor him today. The crowd applauded, laughter and sniffles mingling in the air. The mayor bent down, awkwardly but sincerely, and hammered the sign into the ground by the Turner porch. Rex wagged his tail, as though approving of the gesture. Jack spoke next. His voice, though quiet, carried through the morning air. I thought I brought Rex home to save him, he said, glancing at the dog, but he's the one who saved all of us. Maybe sometimes life sends you a guardian not to protect your body, but to remind you what loyalty looks like. There was silence for a moment, the kind that holds gratitude too big for words. Later, as the people drifted away, the Turners hosted a small gathering in the yard. Alexei served warm cider, her cheeks flushed with laughter. Emma sat on the steps drawing Rex in her sketchbook, her tongue caught between concentration and pride. Luke ran circles around the dog, waving a stick like a sword. Come on, hero, let's go fight another storm, Jack chuckled, watching them. Careful what you wish for, son, he said. By evening, the town lights glowed again, soft lanterns and porch lamps twinkling across the valley. From the ridge, Maple Hollow looked reborn. The sound of music drifted faintly from the church, where Father Quinn rang the bells in quiet thanksgiving. Rex wandered through the yard, sniffing at the grass still damp with rain. He stopped by the fence, gazing toward the forest that framed the town. The sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the treetops. For a moment he stood completely still, ears perked, eyes reflecting gold. Jack followed his gaze and asked softly, You still watching over them, buddy? Rex turned his head slightly, as if to answer, then returned to the porch and lay down, resting his chin on his paws. Night came slowly, wrapping the town in calm. Inside the cabin, Alexei tucked the children into bed. She lingered at the window, watching Jack sit outside beside Rex. His figure was outlined by the glow of the lantern. She knew that look, half contentment, half remembrance. When she joined him, the air had cooled. You're quiet, she said. Jack smiled faintly. Just thinking how different things could have been if we hadn't listened to him. She placed a hand on his arm. You did listen. That's what matters. From the darkness, a soft breeze stirred the pines. It carried the faint scent of rain, but no storm followed. The earth was steady again. As they sat together, a group of fireflies rose from the tall grass, blinking like scattered stars. Emma's sketchbook lay open nearby, a drawing of Rex beneath a halo of light. Alexei picked it up and smiled. She says he's part angel, she said. Jack looked at the dog, whose eyes were half closed, breathing slow and even. If angels walk on 4 legs, I'll believe that. Time passed. The seasons would turn again, storms would come and go, but Maple Hollow would never forget. The wooden sign stayed where it was, weathered by wind and rain, its letters darkening but unbroken. Travelers sometimes stopped by to see the famous guardian dog, and children born after the storm grew up hearing the tale of how a soldier's dog had saved an entire town. Years later, when Luke became a firefighter and Emma a wildlife painter, they still came home often, and always they would find Jack sitting on that same porch, eyes drifting toward the hills, remembering the day the world almost ended, and the dog who didn't let it, sometimes, at dusk, When the air turned gold and the sky went quiet, Jack swore he could still hear Rex's bark echo faintly across the ridge. Maybe it was the wind. Or maybe, as Alexei liked to say, some guardians never truly leave. The forest whispered back, and Maple Hollow slept peacefully beneath the calm sky its guardian once protected. Sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or light from heaven. Sometimes they walk beside us quietly on four legs, reminding us that love itself can be divine. In Rex's story, we saw not just a brave dog, but a messenger of grace, sent to protect, to guide, and to restore faith in the unseen hands that shape our destiny. Just as God watched over the people of Maple Hollow through Rex, perhaps He watches over us too, in ways we might not yet understand. Every act of loyalty, every moment of kindness could be a whisper from heaven saying, "You are not alone." May this story remind us to cherish the guardians in our own lives, human or not, who keep us safe when the storms come. And if you believe, as I do, that faith still moves mountains and that love can be a miracle, then let us keep that light alive together. May God bless you and your loved ones. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to join us for more tales of faith, courage, and unconditional love.